What happens when the most protected child in Britain becomes the target of a photographer willing to break every rule? When Prince Louis, the youngest son of the Prince and Princess of Wales, walked through the gates of his prestigious London prep school on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning, neither he nor his protection team could have predicted that this day would change royal security protocols forever. A single photograph, taken from an impossible angle, would expose a security breach so serious that it would send shockwaves through Kensington Palace and force the royal family to take unprecedented action against the relentless pursuit of the paparazzi. Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell had been protecting members of the royal family for over 15 years, but she had never encountered anything quite like this. As she reviewed the morning's incident reports in her office at Scotland Yard's Specialist Protection Unit, one particular file made her blood run cold. The photograph that landed on news desks across London that morning wasn't just an invasion of privacy. It was evidence of a security failure that could have put Prince Louis in serious danger. The image showed the 8-year-old prince in his school uniform, sitting in what should have been the secure confines of his classroom. But the angle of the shot revealed something far more troubling than a simple breach of the young royal's privacy. The photographer had somehow gained access to a restricted area adjacent to the school grounds, a position that should have been impossible to reach without triggering multiple security alerts. Detective Inspector Mitchell picked up her secure phone and dialed a number that connected her directly to the Royal Protection Team at Kensington Palace. The conversation that followed would set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything the royal family thought they knew about keeping their children safe in an increasingly intrusive media environment. Prince Louis had always been different from his older siblings, Prince George and Princess Charlotte. While they had gradually grown accustomed to the constant presence of photographers during public appearances, Louis possessed an innocence and spontaneity that made him particularly vulnerable to media exploitation. His genuine reactions and unguarded moments had already made him a favorite target for photographers, seeking the perfect candid shot that could sell for thousands of pounds to international publications. The morning had started like any other at Thomas's Battersea, the exclusive preparatory school that had educated both Prince George and Princess Charlotte before Louis's arrival. The school had invested heavily in security measures specifically designed to protect the young members of the royal family who attended there. High walls surrounded the property. Security cameras monitored every entrance and exit, and a sophisticated alarm system had been installed to detect any unauthorized presence on the grounds. But someone had found a way to circumvent all of these protections. Detective Inspector Mitchell arrived at the school within an hour of receiving the alert. The headmaster, Dr. Jonathan Harrington, met her at the main entrance, his usually composed demeanor clearly shaken by the morning's events. Dr. Harrington had been running prestigious schools for over 20 years, but the responsibility of protecting royal children had added layers of complexity to his role that he sometimes found overwhelming. "Inspector Mitchell, thank goodness you're here," Dr. Harrington said as he led her through the school's corridors. "We've secured the area where we believe the photographer was positioned, but I have to admit, we're baffled as to how anyone could have accessed it without our knowledge." The school's security team had already begun their investigation, but Detective Inspector Mitchell's trained eye immediately spotted details that had been overlooked. The positioning required for the photograph suggested that the photographer had spent considerable time studying the school's routines and security patterns. This wasn't a random paparazzi opportunity. It was a carefully planned operation. As they walked toward the classroom where Prince Louis had been photographed, Detective Inspector Mitchell noticed several students peering curiously from doorways and windows. The presence of police officers and additional security personnel had not gone unnoticed by the school community, and she could see teachers working hard to maintain normalcy while dealing with their own concerns about the security breach. Prince Louis himself seemed remarkably unaffected by the morning's drama. At 8 years old, he had grown up with security as a constant but unobtrusive presence in his life. The royal protection officers assigned to him had worked hard to ensure that their presence felt natural rather than oppressive, allowing him to experience as normal a childhood as possible, given his unique circumstances. But Detective Inspector Mitchell knew that this incident represented a dangerous escalation in the media's pursuit of the young prince. The photograph had been taken during a mathematics lesson, capturing Louis as he worked on arithmetic problems with complete concentration. The invasion of such an intimate educational moment demonstrated a level of intrusion that crossed every reasonable boundary of privacy and safety. The detective's examination of the security footage from the morning revealed the sophisticated nature of the breach. The photographer had somehow disabled a section of the perimeter alarm system without triggering backup alerts. This suggested technical knowledge and planning that went far beyond the capabilities of a typical freelance paparazzi photographer working alone. As Detective Inspector Mitchell reviewed the evidence, she began to piece together a picture of an operation that had been months in the planning. Phone records would later reveal that the photographer had been in contact with several individuals who had detailed knowledge of the school's security systems and daily routines. The investigation was revealing a network of people willing to compromise the safety of a child for financial gain. The Royal Protection Team at Kensington Palace was already implementing emergency protocols by the time Detective Inspector Mitchell contacted them with her preliminary findings. Prince William and Catherine, the Prince and Princess of Wales, had been informed of the situation and were reportedly furious about the security breach. Their anger, however, was tempered by their deep concern for their youngest son's well-being and their determination to ensure that such an incident could never happen again. The palace's response would prove to be swift and decisive. But first, Detective Inspector Mitchell needed to understand exactly how the photographer had managed to penetrate what everyone had believed to be an impenetrable security system. Her investigation would take her into a shadowy world where the pursuit of royal photographs had become a high-stakes game involving sophisticated technology, inside information, and individuals willing to risk everything for the chance to capture images that could make them wealthy overnight. The photographer responsible for the morning's breach was Marcus Thompson, a freelance photojournalist whose career had been built on pushing boundaries and taking risks that other photographers wouldn't consider. Thompson had spent the better part of 3 months studying the school's security systems, identifying patterns in the Royal Protection Team's routines, and developing the technical capabilities necessary to disable alarm systems without detection. Thompson's motivation wasn't just financial, although the potential payoff for exclusive photographs of Prince Louis was substantial. He had become obsessed with the idea of capturing images that no other photographer could obtain, driven by a desire to prove his superiority in an increasingly competitive field. This obsession had led him to cross lines that even the most aggressive paparazzi photographers typically respected. The equipment Thompson had used for the morning's operation was sophisticated and expensive. Hidden cameras with telephoto lenses, electronic jamming devices, and climbing equipment that had allowed him to access the restricted area adjacent to the school grounds. The level of preparation and investment suggested that this was just the beginning of what Thompson had planned for the young prince. Detective Inspector Mitchell's investigation revealed that Thompson had been building a detailed profile of Prince Louis's daily routines for months. He had identified the exact time when the prince's mathematics class took place, the seating arrangement in the classroom, and the optimal angle for photographing him through the window. This level of detailed surveillance was deeply disturbing and suggested that Thompson's intentions went far beyond simply taking a few unauthorized photographs. The detective's findings would prove crucial in the royal family's decision about how to respond to this unprecedented threat to their youngest child's safety. The evidence clearly showed that this wasn't an isolated incident committed by an opportunistic photographer, but rather the work of someone whose obsession with Prince Louis posed an ongoing danger that required immediate and decisive action. As Detective Inspector Mitchell prepared her report for the Royal Protection Team, she couldn't help but think about the 8-year-old boy who had become the unwitting target of such an elaborate scheme. Prince Louis was just trying to get an education and enjoy his childhood, but the circumstances of his birth had made him a commodity in a market where privacy and safety were sacrificed for profit and fame. The morning's events had demonstrated that traditional security measures were no longer sufficient to protect the young members of the royal family. The threat had evolved, becoming more sophisticated and more dangerous, and the response would need to evolve as well. Detective Inspector Mitchell's investigation was about to set in motion a series of events that would change how the royal family protected their children and how they dealt with media intrusion into their private lives. The photograph that had started everything was still circulating in news outlets around the world, but behind the scenes, a much larger story was beginning to unfold. The royal family's response to Marcus Thompson's breach would prove to be unlike anything they had done before, and it would send a clear message to anyone else who might be considering similar actions against their children. Prince Louis continued his school day, unaware that his photograph had sparked an investigation that would reach into the highest levels of government and law enforcement. But Detective Inspector Mitchell and the Royal Protection Team were already working on ensuring that he would never again be vulnerable to such an intrusion. The game was about to change, and Marcus Thompson had no idea what he had set in motion with his carefully planned breach of security. The investigation was just beginning, but already it was clear that this incident would have far-reaching consequences that extended far beyond a single unauthorized photograph. The safety of the royal children was at stake, and everyone involved was prepared to take whatever action was necessary to protect them from those who would exploit their vulnerability for personal gain. The emergency meeting at Kensington Palace was unlike any gathering in the royal household's recent memory. Detective Inspector Mitchell's preliminary report had been circulated to key members of the Royal Protection Team, palace security chiefs, and senior staff members who needed to understand the full scope of what they were dealing with. The ornate conference room, typically reserved for ceremonial planning and diplomatic meetings, had been transformed into a crisis management center with secure communication equipment and detailed security maps spread across the polished mahogany table. Prince William entered the room with the controlled composure that had served him well through years of public scrutiny, but those who knew him well could see the tension in his shoulders and the steel in his eyes. The Prince of Wales had always been protective of his children's privacy and safety, but the morning's incident had triggered something deeper, a fierce paternal instinct that would not tolerate any threat to his youngest son's well-being. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, followed closely behind her husband, her expression reflecting the same mixture of anger and determination. As a mother, she understood perhaps better than anyone the violation that had occurred when someone had managed to photograph Louis in what should have been the safety of his classroom. The princess had always worked to give her children as normal a childhood as possible, but incidents like this reminded her of the unique challenges they faced simply because of who they were. Detective Inspector Mitchell stood as the royal couple entered the room, and she was struck by the gravity of the moment. In her 15 years of protecting members of the royal family, she had briefed them on numerous security concerns, but never had the threat felt so personal or so immediate. The detective's preliminary investigation had revealed details that made this incident far more serious than anyone had initially realized. "Inspector Mitchell, thank you for responding so quickly," Prince William said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command, but tempered with genuine concern. "We need to understand exactly what happened this morning and what it means for Louis's safety going forward." The detective opened her file and began to present the disturbing findings of her investigation. Marcus Thompson had not acted alone, and his breach of the school's security had been far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. The evidence suggested a network of individuals who had been gathering intelligence about the royal family's routines and security arrangements for months. "Your Royal Highnesses," Detective Inspector Mitchell began, "what we're dealing with goes far beyond a typical paparazzi intrusion. The photographer, Marcus Thompson, had access to detailed information about Prince Louis's school schedule, the layout of the security systems, and the daily routines of the protection team. This level of intelligence suggests inside knowledge or extensive surveillance operations." Catherine leaned forward in her chair, her concern evident. "Are you saying that someone has been watching our son for months without our knowledge?" "I'm afraid that appears to be the case, Your Royal Highness. The evidence suggests that Thompson had been conducting surveillance on Prince Louis's movements for at least 12 weeks. He had mapped the school's security systems, identified vulnerabilities in the perimeter defenses, and developed the technical capabilities to exploit them." Prince William's jaw tightened as he processed this information. The idea that someone had been systematically studying his 8-year-old son's daily routine was deeply unsettling and represented a level of intrusion that crossed every reasonable boundary. "What do we know about this Thompson character? Is he working for a particular publication?" Detective Inspector Mitchell consulted her notes before responding. "Marcus Thompson is a freelance photographer with a history of aggressive tactics in pursuing celebrity subjects. However, this operation represents a significant escalation in his methods. The equipment he used, The technical knowledge he displayed, and the months of preparation suggest that someone was funding this operation, or that Thompson had access to resources beyond those of a typical freelance photographer. The detective's investigation had revealed financial transactions that suggested Thompson had been receiving regular payments from an unknown source during the months leading up to the school breach. Bank records showed deposits that far exceeded what a freelance photographer would typically earn from legitimate assignments, indicating that someone was investing heavily in Thompson's surveillance of Prince Louis. We believe Thompson may be part of a larger network that specializes in obtaining exclusive content about the royal family, Detective Inspector Mitchell continued. The sophistication of this operation suggests coordination with individuals who have technical expertise in security systems and possibly inside knowledge of royal protection protocols. The implications of this revelation were staggering. If there was indeed a network of people systematically working to compromise the security of the royal family's children, then every aspect of their protection arrangements would need to be reviewed and potentially redesigned. The safety measures that had been considered adequate were clearly insufficient to deal with this new level of threat. Catherine spoke up, her voice steady despite the obvious stress of the situation. What immediate steps are being taken to ensure Louis' safety while we investigate this further? Detective Inspector Mitchell had anticipated this question and had already begun coordinating with the Royal Protection Team to implement enhanced security measures. We've increased the protection detail around Prince Louis and implemented additional screening procedures at the school. The area where Thompson positioned himself has been secured, and we're conducting a complete review of the school's perimeter defenses. But even as these immediate measures were being put in place, everyone in the room understood that they were dealing with a fundamental challenge to the way royal security operated. The traditional approach of maintaining a protective bubble around the royal family while allowing them to maintain relatively normal public lives, was being tested by individuals who were willing to invest significant resources and take considerable risks to breach that protection. Prince William stood and walked to the window overlooking the palace gardens, where his children had played countless times under the watchful eyes of their protection officers. The irony was not lost on him that even here, in what should be one of the most secure locations in Britain, they were discussing threats to his son's safety that had originated from outside those very windows. "Inspector, I want to know everything about this Thompson and anyone who might be working with him," Prince William said, turning back to face the room. "My children should not have to live in fear because someone thinks photographing them without permission is an acceptable way to make money." The detective nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility that came with protecting the Prince of Wales's children. "We're conducting a full investigation into Thompson's background, his financial arrangements, and his known associates. We've also requested assistance from the Serious Organized Crime Agency to help us understand the scope of any network that might be involved." As the meeting continued, it became clear that the royal family was prepared to take unprecedented action to protect their children from this new type of threat. The days when media intrusion could be managed through traditional diplomatic channels and gentle requests for privacy were coming to an end. The Thompson incident had demonstrated that some individuals were willing to cross any line for the right price, and the response would need to be equally determined. Catherine had been quietly reviewing the security reports while the others talked, and she looked up with a question that cut to the heart of their concerns. How do we protect Louis's childhood while ensuring his safety? He's 8 years old. He shouldn't have to live like he's under siege. This was perhaps the most challenging aspect of the entire situation. The royal family's commitment to giving their children as normal a childhood as possible had always been balanced against the realities of their security needs. But incidents like the Thompson breach threatened to tip that balance toward a level of protection that could isolate the young royals from the very experiences that would help them develop into well-rounded adults. Detective Inspector Mitchell had been thinking about this challenge throughout her investigation. "Your Royal Highnesses, I believe we need to approach this from multiple angles. Enhanced security is essential, but we also need to address the demand side of this equation. As long as there's a market for unauthorized photographs of your children, there will be people like Thompson willing to take extraordinary risks to obtain them." Prince William nodded, recognizing the wisdom in the detective's assessment. The royal family had always been reluctant to take aggressive legal action against media organizations, preferring to work through established channels and maintain relationships with responsible journalists. But the Thompson incident suggested that this approach was no longer sufficient to deter those operating outside the bounds of legitimate journalism. "What kind of legal options are available to us?" Prince William asked, his tone indicating a readiness to explore approaches that might have been considered too aggressive in the past. Detective Inspector Mitchell had consulted with the palace's legal team in preparation for this question. "The invasion of privacy is clear, but we may also be able to pursue charges related to the security breach itself." Thompson's methods involved criminal trespass, potential violations of communications regulations related to his jamming equipment, and possibly conspiracy charges if we can prove coordination with others. The legal implications of the case were complex, but they offered multiple avenues for holding Thompson and any associates accountable for their actions. More importantly, a vigorous legal response would send a clear message to others who might be considering similar operations that the royal family was prepared to use every available tool to protect their children. As the meeting drew toward a conclusion, Prince William made a decision that would define the royal family's response to this new type of threat. "Inspector, I want you to pursue this investigation with every resource at your disposal. Find out who Thompson was working with, how they obtained their intelligence, and what they were planning to do next. And I want the legal team to explore every possible charge that can be brought against everyone involved." Catherine added her voice to her husband's directive. "Our children deserve to feel safe at school, at home, and anywhere else they go. If that means we have to be more aggressive in protecting them, then that's what we'll do." Detective Inspector Mitchell left the palace that evening with a clear mandate and the full backing of the royal family for an investigation that would be more comprehensive and aggressive than anything that had been undertaken in response to media intrusion. The Thompson incident had crossed a line that could not be ignored, and the response would establish new boundaries for anyone who thought the royal children were fair game for exploitation. The investigation was about to expand far beyond a single photographer's breach of security. Phone records, financial transactions, and surveillance footage from locations across London were being analyzed to identify everyone who had played a role in the operation that had violated Prince Louis's privacy and safety. The royal family's response would prove to be swift, decisive, and unlike anything the media had experienced before. Marcus Thompson had thought he was simply taking photographs that would advance his career and generate significant income. He had no idea that his carefully planned breach of security would trigger an investigation that would expose a network of individuals who had been systematically targeting the royal family's children. The consequences of his actions would extend far beyond anything he had imagined, and the royal family's response would change the landscape for anyone who thought the pursuit of unauthorized royal photographs was worth the risk. The investigation into Marcus Thompson's network had been expanding rapidly over the past week, and Detective Inspector Mitchell found herself at the center of one of the most complex royal security cases in recent history. Her team had been working around the clock to analyze the evidence, and what they had discovered was far more disturbing than anyone had initially anticipated. The breach of Prince Louis's school security was not an isolated incident, but part of a sophisticated operation that had been targeting multiple members of the royal family for months. The breakthrough came when Detective Inspector Mitchell's cybercrime specialist, Detective Sergeant James Crawford, discovered a pattern in Thompson's digital communications that revealed the existence of a private online forum where individuals shared intelligence about royal family movements, security arrangements, and potential photographic opportunities. The forum operated under multiple layers of encryption and required substantial membership fees, suggesting that its participants were serious about their activities and had significant financial resources at their disposal. "Ma'am, you need to see this," Detective Sergeant Crawford said as he pulled up the forum's contents on his secure computer terminal. "We've managed to access Thompson's account, and what we found suggests this network has been operating for at least 2 years. They've been systematically gathering intelligence on all 3 of the Wales children, not just Prince Louis." Detective Inspector Mitchell leaned over Crawford's shoulder to examine the forum posts, and what she saw made her stomach turn. Detailed schedules of Prince George's cricket matches, Princess Charlotte's ballet lessons, and Prince Louis's school activities. Photographs of the children taken without their parents' knowledge or consent. Discussion of security vulnerabilities and strategies for exploiting them. This wasn't just paparazzi photography. It was systematic surveillance of children. The forum members used code names and sophisticated techniques to hide their identities, but Detective Inspector Mitchell's team was gradually piecing together the real identities of the key participants. Thompson, who went by the username Royal Hunter, was clearly one of the more active members, but he was far from the only one involved in gathering intelligence about the royal children. One particularly disturbing thread focused specifically on Prince Louis's daily routines at school. Forum members had contributed detailed observations about the timing of his arrival and departure, the location of his classroom, the positioning of security personnel, and the optimal angles for photographing him without detection. The level of detail suggested that multiple individuals had been conducting surveillance on the 8-year-old prince for months. Detective Inspector Mitchell immediately contacted Kensington Palace to brief the Royal Protection Team on these new developments. The discovery of the forum changed everything about how they understood the threat to the royal children. This wasn't just about Thompson anymore. It was about a network of individuals who were treating the surveillance of children as a profitable business venture. The response from Prince William and Catherine was swift and decisive. Within hours of learning about the forum's existence, the royal couple had authorized Detective Inspector Mitchell to expand her investigation to include every member of the network and to pursue them with the full force of the law. The gloves were coming off, and anyone involved in the systematic surveillance of their children would face the consequences. The legal team at Kensington Palace, led by senior counsel Rebecca Morrison, had been working on developing a comprehensive strategy for pursuing the network members through the courts. The challenge was significant. The forum participants had gone to great lengths to hide their identities and activities, but the evidence that Detective Inspector Mitchell's team had gathered provided multiple avenues for legal action. We're looking at charges ranging from stalking and harassment to conspiracy and violations of the Data Protection Act, Rebecca Morrison explained during a secure video conference with the investigation team. The systematic nature of their surveillance activities and the targeting of children gives us several strong legal foundations for prosecution. The international scope of the network presented additional complexities. Forum members appeared to be located not just in the United Kingdom, but across Europe and North America. Some of the most valuable intelligence about the royal children was being gathered by individuals who had never set foot in Britain, but who were coordinating with local operatives to obtain photographs and information. Detective Inspector Mitchell's team had identified at least 12 active participants in the forum, including professional photographers, private investigators, and individuals with technical expertise in surveillance equipment. The financial records associated with the forum revealed transactions totaling hundreds of thousands of pounds, indicating that this was a lucrative operation for those involved. The investigation had also revealed the existence of a sophisticated market for unauthorized photographs and information about the royal children. Private collectors, international media organizations, and social media influencers were paying premium prices for exclusive content that couldn't be obtained through legitimate channels. The demand was driving increasingly aggressive behavior from those willing to supply it. One of the most shocking discoveries was evidence that forum members had attempted to recruit staff members from organizations that had regular contact with the royal family. Schools, sports clubs, and even charitable organizations had been targeted by individuals seeking inside information about the children's activities and schedules. While these recruitment efforts appeared to have been unsuccessful, the fact that they had been attempted demonstrated the lengths to which the network was willing to go. Detective Inspector Mitchell knew that the investigation was approaching a critical phase. The evidence they had gathered was substantial, but actually bringing the network members to justice would require careful coordination with law enforcement agencies across multiple jurisdictions. The royal family's reputation and the safety of their children hung in the balance, and there could be no mistakes in how the case was handled. Prince William had been receiving regular updates on the investigation's progress, and his determination to see justice done had only grown stronger as the scope of the network became clear. The Prince of Wales had always been protective of his children's privacy, but learning that they had been the subjects of systematic surveillance for years had triggered a response that surprised even those who knew him well. "I want every single person involved in this network identified and prosecuted to the full extent of the law," Prince William told Detective Inspector Mitchell during one of their regular briefings. "My children are not commodities to be traded by people who think their privacy and safety are worth nothing more than the price of a photograph." Catherine had been equally resolute in her determination to protect their children from future intrusions. The Princess of Wales had spent considerable time reviewing the security arrangements for all three of their children and had approved significant enhancements to their protection protocols. The days when the royal children could move through the world with relatively unobtrusive security were coming to an end, at least until the threat posed by networks like Thomson's could be neutralized. The psychological impact on the children themselves had been a constant concern throughout the investigation. Prince Louis, at 8 years old, was still too young to fully understand what had happened, but Prince George and Princess Charlotte were old enough to recognize that something serious was occurring. The royal couple had worked with child psychologists to ensure that their children felt secure, while gradually helping them understand the realities of their unique situation. Detective Inspector Mitchell's investigation had also revealed disturbing evidence that the network had been planning to expand their operations. Forum discussions referenced potential surveillance of other royal children, including those further down the line of succession. The network appeared to view any member of the royal family under the age of 18 as a potential target for their activities. The technical capabilities of the network were particularly concerning. In addition to conventional photography equipment, Forum members had access to sophisticated electronic surveillance tools, drone technology, and even cyber intrusion capabilities that could potentially compromise the security systems protecting royal residences and schools. The threat they posed went far beyond simple paparazzi photography. As the investigation entered its third week, Detective Inspector Mitchell's team had gathered enough evidence to begin making arrests. The decision about when and how to move against the network members required careful consideration of multiple factors, including the need to ensure that all participants were identified before any of them had the opportunity to destroy evidence or flee the jurisdiction. The first arrest warrant was issued for Marcus Thomson on charges that included stalking, harassment, violation of privacy, criminal trespass, and conspiracy. But Thomson was just the beginning. The evidence suggested that he was actually one of the lower-level participants in the network, despite being the one whose actions had brought the entire operation to light. The network's leader appeared to be someone using the codename Crown Jewel, whose real identity had proven particularly elusive. This individual had been coordinating the activities of other network members, providing funding for surveillance operations, and maintaining connections with the buyers who were purchasing the unauthorized photographs and information. Identifying and apprehending Crown Jewel had become Detective Inspector Mitchell's top priority. The investigation had taken on a significance that extended far beyond the specific threat to Prince Louis. The systematic nature of the network's activities represented a new type of challenge to royal security, one that required innovative responses and unprecedented cooperation between law enforcement agencies, legal teams, and security specialists. Prince William and Catherine had made it clear that they were prepared to see this investigation through to its conclusion, regardless of how long it took or how many people were ultimately involved. Their children deserved to grow up without being constantly surveilled by individuals who saw them as nothing more than opportunities for profit. The royal couple's determination had been communicated throughout the investigation team, creating a sense of purpose and urgency that was driving everyone involved to pursue every lead and explore every possibility. The network that had targeted their children was about to discover that the royal family was prepared to fight back with every resource at their disposal. Detective Inspector Mitchell knew that the next phase of the investigation would be the most challenging yet. Arresting network members and building cases that would stand up in court would require precise coordination and flawless execution. But she was confident that her team had the evidence and the backing necessary to bring these individuals to justice and send a clear message to anyone else who might be considering similar activities. The game was about to change for anyone who thought the royal children were fair targets for exploitation. The investigation that had started with a single unauthorized photograph of Prince Louis was about to expose an entire network and demonstrate that the royal family would not tolerate threats to their children's safety and privacy. The coordinated arrests began at dawn on a crisp Thursday morning, exactly 3 weeks after Marcus Thomson had breached Prince Louis's school security. Detective Inspector Mitchell had spent the previous night finalizing the operational details with law enforcement teams across 3 countries, ensuring that every member of the surveillance network would be apprehended simultaneously to to prevent any of them from warning the others or destroying evidence. The first arrest took place at Thompson's modest flat in South London, where Detective Inspector Mitchell personally led the team that broke down his door at precisely 6 o'clock in the morning. Thompson, still in his pajamas and clearly shocked by the sudden arrival of armed police officers, offered no resistance as he was read his rights and taken into custody. The search of his flat revealed equipment worth tens of thousands of pounds, including telephoto lenses, electronic jamming devices, and sophisticated surveillance technology that confirmed the serious nature of his operations. Simultaneously, arrest teams were moving against network members across Europe. In Paris, French police apprehended a professional photographer who had been specializing in surveillance of royal family members during their overseas visits. In Amsterdam, Dutch authorities arrested a private investigator who had been coordinating intelligence-gathering activities and maintaining the encrypted communication systems that the network used to share information. In New York, FBI agents working in cooperation with British authorities arrested an American collector who had been purchasing unauthorized photographs of royal children for his private collection. But the most significant arrest took place in a luxury apartment overlooking Hyde Park, where Detective Inspector Mitchell's team finally apprehended the individual known as Crown Jewel. The man's real name was Jeffrey Hartwell, a former tabloid journalist who had reinvented himself as the coordinator of what amounted to a commercial surveillance operation targeting the most vulnerable members of the royal family. Hartwell's arrest revealed the true scope and sophistication of the network that had been targeting Prince Louis and his siblings. The evidence seized from his apartment included detailed files on all three of the Wales children, containing photographs, schedules, personal information, and even psychological profiles that had been compiled to help predict their behavior and movements. The level of detail was staggering and deeply disturbing to everyone involved in the investigation. The searches conducted at the various locations revealed evidence that the network had been planning to expand their operations significantly. Draft proposals for surveillance operations targeting other young members of the royal family had been found, along with financial projections suggesting that the network's leadership believed they could generate millions of pounds annually from their activities. Detective Inspector Mitchell returned to Kensington Palace that afternoon to brief Prince William and Catherine on the results of the morning's operations. The royal couple had been waiting anxiously for news about whether the arrests had been successful, and the detective could see the relief in their faces as she confirmed that all of the primary network members had been taken into custody. "Your Royal Highnesses, I'm pleased to report that the arrests were conducted without incident and that we have successfully apprehended all of the individuals we identified as core members of the surveillance network." Detective Inspector Mitchell began her briefing. "The evidence we've seized will provide the foundation for comprehensive prosecutions that should serve as a deterrent to anyone else considering similar activities." Prince William listened intently as the detective described the scope of what had been discovered during the searches. The sophistication of the network's operations and the level of detail in their surveillance files made it clear that his children had been under systematic observation for far longer than anyone had realized. The violation of their privacy had been comprehensive and deeply troubling. "What happens next?" Catherine asked, her concern for her children's ongoing safety evident in her voice. "How do we ensure that this doesn't happen again?" Detective Inspector Mitchell had been preparing for this question throughout the investigation. "The prosecution of these individuals will send a strong message that this type of activity will not be tolerated, but we also need to address the underlying market demand that makes such operations profitable." The palace legal team is developing a comprehensive strategy that includes both criminal prosecutions and civil actions against the organizations that purchase and distribute unauthorized content about royal children. The legal strategy that had been developed was indeed comprehensive and unprecedented in its scope. The palace's legal team, working with the Crown Prosecution Service, had identified multiple criminal charges that could be brought against each network member, including stalking, harassment, conspiracy, violations of privacy laws, and in some cases, violations of national security regulations related to their surveillance of protected individuals. But the criminal prosecutions were only part of the response. The palace was also pursuing civil actions against media organizations that had knowingly purchased and published photographs obtained through illegal surveillance activities. The goal was to make it financially devastating for any organization to deal in unauthorized content about royal children. thereby reducing the market demand that made networks like Hartwell's profitable. The impact of the arrests had been immediate and dramatic. News of the coordinated international operation spread quickly through media organizations and freelance photography networks, sending a clear message that the royal family was prepared to use the full force of the law to protect their children's privacy and safety. Several photographers who had been known to pursue aggressive tactics in photographing royal children had quietly withdrawn from such activities, recognizing that the risks now far outweighed any potential rewards. Jeffrey Hartwell's interrogation revealed additional details about how the network had operated and who else might have been involved in supporting their activities. The former journalist had initially attempted to portray himself as simply a coordinator who helped photographers share information, but the evidence against him was overwhelming and eventually led to a full confession about the scope of the operation he had been running. The financial investigation into the network revealed that Hartwell had been generating substantial income from his coordination activities, taking commissions from both the photographers who gathered intelligence and the buyers who purchased the resulting photographs and information. Bank records showed transactions totaling over £500,000 over the previous 2 years, demonstrating the lucrative nature of the illegal surveillance market. The international cooperation that had made the arrests possible had been unprecedented in a case involving royal security. Detective Inspector Mitchell's coordination with law enforcement agencies across multiple countries had required months of careful diplomatic and legal work to ensure that all jurisdictions could act simultaneously and that evidence could be shared across national boundaries. The psychological assessment of the network members revealed a disturbing mindset that viewed royal children not as vulnerable individuals deserving protection, but as commodities whose every movement and expression had potential market value. The dehumanizing nature of their activities had been one of the most troubling aspects of the entire investigation. Prince William and Catherine had made the decision to personally visit the school where Prince Louis had been photographed, to thank the staff for their cooperation during the investigation, and to announce new security measures that would protect all students, not just their son. The royal couple's appearance at the school was carefully planned to demonstrate their commitment to ensuring that such an incident could never happen again. The new security measures included enhanced perimeter monitoring, improved communication systems between the school and royal protection teams, and additional training for staff members to help them identify potential security threats. The palace had also provided funding for security upgrades that would benefit the entire school community, recognizing that protecting Prince Louis required protecting the environment in which he was being educated. The prosecution of the network members proceeded quickly through the courts, with most defendants choosing to plead guilty rather than face the full range of charges that had been prepared against them. Marcus Thompson received a 3-year prison sentence and was banned from coming within 1,000 meters of any location frequented by members of the royal family. Jeffrey Hartwell received a 5-year sentence and substantial financial penalties that effectively bankrupted him and ensured that he could never again finance such operations. The civil actions against media organizations that had purchased unauthorized photographs proved equally successful. Several major international publications agreed to pay substantial damages and committed to implementing new editorial policies that would prevent them from purchasing content obtained through illegal surveillance activities. The financial settlements were donated to charities that work to protect children's privacy rights. Detective Inspector Mitchell's investigation had achieved its primary objectives. The network that had been systematically surveilling royal children had been dismantled, its members prosecuted, and the market demand for their illegal activities significantly reduced. But perhaps more importantly, the investigation had established new precedents for how royal security would respond to threats against the royal family's children. The success of the investigation had demonstrated that the royal family was prepared to use every available legal and law enforcement resource to protect their children from exploitation. The message had been received clearly by anyone who might have been considering similar activities. The royal children were not fair game, and anyone who attempted to treat them as such would face severe consequences. For Prince Louis, the resolution of the case meant that he could return to his normal school routine without the constant worry that he was being watched and photographed without his knowledge or consent. At 8 years old, he would never fully understand the scope of what had been done to protect him, but he would benefit from the enhanced security measures and the deterrent effect on others who might have been tempted to follow Thompson's example. The investigation had also strengthened the relationship between the royal family and law enforcement agencies, establishing new protocols for responding to threats against royal children and improving communication between palace security teams and external law enforcement organizations. The cooperation that had made the arrests possible would serve as a model for future operations. Prince William and Catherine's decision to pursue the network aggressively had sent a clear message about their priorities as parents. Their children's safety and privacy were not negotiable, and anyone who threatened those fundamental rights would face the full consequences of their actions. The royal couple had demonstrated that they were prepared to break with traditional approaches to media relations when their children's well-being was at stake. The aftermath of the investigation brought a period of relative calm to the royal family's relationship with the media. The aggressive prosecution of the surveillance network had established clear boundaries about what would and would not be tolerated, and most photographers and media organizations had adjusted their practices accordingly. The market for unauthorized photographs of royal children had been significantly disrupted, making such activities far less profitable and far more risky. Detective Inspector Mitchell received commendations for her leadership of the investigation from both Scotland Yard and Kensington Palace. Her methodical approach to uncovering the network and her coordination of the international arrests have been instrumental in protecting the royal children and establishing new standards for royal security operations. The case would be studied for years as an example of how law enforcement, legal teams, and royal protection services could work together to address modern threats to royal security. The sophistication of the surveillance network and the comprehensive response to it had established new precedents that would influence how such cases were handled in the future. Most importantly, the investigation had achieved its ultimate goal, ensuring that Prince Louis and his siblings could continue their childhoods with the privacy and security that every child deserved, regardless of the circumstances of their birth. The network that had threatened their safety had been neutralized, and the message had been sent clearly that the royal children were under the protection of the law, and that anyone who violated that protection would face serious consequences.